Have you ever stopped to ask yourself a difficult question? What if the problem is not that God has forgotten you, but that you are standing in the wrong position? What if you have been praying for a door to open, but God has been preparing you to stand at the door when it opens? What if the opportunity you keep asking God for requires a version of you that your current habits have not yet produced? And what if the breakthrough you have been praying about is connected to a level of discipline you have been avoiding? Because discipline is not always exciting, comfortable, or convenient. Sometimes we ask God to change our circumstances when God is trying to change our position, our thinking, our habits, our priorities, and our willingness to obey. You may look at your life and say, God, when will my season change? But heaven may be asking, when will you change the way you are showing up in the season you are already in? Because there are moments when the greatest evidence that God is working in your life is not that everything around you has changed, but that something inside you has finally decided to stop living beneath what God has called you to become. Think about the person who wakes up every morning knowing there is something they should be doing, but somehow another day disappears without them doing it. They have goals written in notebooks, plans saved on their phones, ideas that have been sitting in their hearts for months, and dreams they have talked about for years. Yet every time they are close to taking action, something distracts them. They tell themselves, I will start tomorrow, but tomorrow becomes next week. Next week becomes next month. And eventually the dream begins to feel impossible simply because it has been postponed for so long. Maybe you know what that feels like because you have missed deadlines, delayed applications, abandoned projects, started routines and stopped them, promised yourself that you would become more disciplined, and then wondered why nothing seems to move. You, snorts, pray for increase, but perhaps you have not learned to manage what is already in your hands. You pray for a greater platform, but you struggle to be consistent when nobody is watching. You pray for opportunity, but you keep allowing distraction to consume the time that preparation requires. And I want you to hear this clearly today. This message is not coming to condemn you. It is coming to wake you up, because there is still time to reposition yourself. More importantly, I want you to understand that God's favor does not remove your responsibility. It gives your responsibility divine direction. Favor is not permission to sit still and expect everything to happen without preparation. Because God can open a door, but you still have to be ready to walk through it. God can give you an opportunity, but you must develop the character, wisdom, skill, and discipline required to steward that opportunity. Look at what the Bible says in Proverbs 6-8. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest. Notice something powerful about the ant. Nobody has to stand over it every morning shouting, get up, get to work, prepare yourself. The ant understands something many people forget. That preparation cannot always wait for pressure, applause, or motivation. There are things you have to do because you know where you are going, even when nobody is watching, nobody is clapping, and nobody is forcing you. Therefore, I want you to begin seeing your ordinary responsibilities differently. When you wake up and pray, that is positioning. When you choose to focus instead of scrolling endlessly, that is positioning. When you finish the assignment you have been postponing, that is positioning. When you save instead of spending everything impulsively, that is positioning. When you study, practice, exercise, create, apply, organize, and keep your word, that is positioning. Nobody may see those decisions today, but your future will eventually reveal what you did with the moments nobody applauded. You cannot keep asking God for a harvest while refusing to plant consistently. You cannot keep asking God for a new season while protecting the habits that keep you in the old one. You cannot keep saying, I am waiting on God, when God may be waiting on your obedience to the last instruction He already gave you. There comes a moment when prayer must produce movement, faith must produce action, and desire must become discipline. The question is no longer simply what has God promised me, but also what am I doing with what God has already placed in my hands. Finally, this is why the prayer we are praying today is deeper than simply asking God to give us more. We are asking God to keep us in the right position so that when the opportunity comes, we are not distracted, unprepared, bitter, exhausted, or controlled by fear. We are saying, God, keep my heart aligned with you. Keep my mind focused on what matters. Keep my hands disciplined enough to complete what you have placed before me, and keep my feet from wandering into places that look attractive but are outside your purpose. And then we are asking for something only God can provide. When my strength cannot speak for me, let your favor speak for me. When my name cannot open the door, let your favor speak for me. When my ability reaches its limit, let your favor speak for me. But while we ask for favor, we will prepare. While we wait for the door, we will develop. While we wait for the answer, we will remain faithful. And while we cannot see the full picture, we will continue taking the next obedient step, because perhaps the miracle you have been waiting for is not merely a change in your circumstances, but a transformation in your position. And perhaps today God is calling you out of procrastination, distraction, fear, comparison, and inconsistency, and into a life where your habits finally agree with your prayers. So before you ask God to change everything around you, ask Him to position everything within you. Because when your heart is aligned, your mind is renewed, your hands are disciplined, and your steps are ordered, you become ready for the very thing you have been praying to receive. There is a difference between knowing you are called to more and actually becoming prepared for more. Many people have a picture in their heart of the life they believe God has called them to live. But there is a painful gap between that picture and their present reality. You can have a powerful vision and still have weak habits, genuine faith, and still struggle with consistency, a God-given dream, and still be trapped in procrastination. You can know exactly what you should be doing and still find yourself doing everything except the thing that matters most. That gap can become frustrating because you look at where you are and compare it with where you believe you should be, and suddenly you begin questioning yourself, questioning your progress, and sometimes even questioning whether God really called you. But I want you to understand something. The distance between where you are and where you are going is often crossed through small acts of obedience repeated over time. God may have shown you the destination, but He may be using your present season to develop the character, discipline, wisdom, and endurance you will need when you arrive. Consider the person who is praying for a promotion, but has not developed the discipline to become excellent in their current position.
They arrive late, miss deadlines, avoid responsibility, and then wonder why someone else keeps getting the opportunities they wanted. Consider the person praying for a successful business while refusing to learn how money works, refusing to improve their skills, refusing to understand their customers, and refusing to become consistent. Consider the person praying for a platform while neglecting the message, the character, and the preparation that should support that platform. We sometimes ask God to enlarge our territory while ignoring the territory already in our hands. We ask Him for more responsibility while failing to faithfully manage the responsibilities we already have. Jesus teaches this principle in Luke 16:10 when He says that whoever is faithful with very little will also be faithful with much. That means your current assignment may be more important than you realize, because what looks small to you may be training you for something larger in the future. Do not despise the ordinary season simply because it does not look like the extraordinary future you imagined. Likewise, look at how easily procrastination can disguise itself as preparation. You keep researching, planning, watching videos, buying notebooks, creating schedules, downloading applications, and talking about what you are going to do, but you never actually begin. You tell yourself that you are waiting for the right time. But sometimes there is no perfect time coming. There will always be another responsibility, another inconvenience, another reason to delay, another fear telling you to wait just a little longer. At some point, preparation must become execution. You cannot spend your entire life standing at the edge of the assignment because you are afraid that your first attempt will not be perfect. Ecclesiastes 11:4 gives us a powerful warning that whoever watches the wind will not plant, and whoever looks at the clouds will not reap.
In other words, if you wait until every condition is perfect before you act, you may spend your entire life waiting. Faith does not demand that you know everything before you begin. Faith often requires you to take the next step with the understanding you have today. Furthermore, some of you are not dealing with laziness as much as you are dealing with distraction. Your attention is being divided into 100 different directions, and then you wonder why you are not making progress in the one direction that matters most. You wake up intending to spend 30 minutes working on your goal, but you check one notification, then another message, then one video, then another post, and suddenly an hour has disappeared. You sit down to complete an important task, but your mind keeps jumping between what someone else is doing, what someone said about you, what is happening online, and what might happen tomorrow. Your body is present, but your attention is somewhere else. Proverbs 4:25-27 tells us to let our eyes look straight ahead, to carefully consider the path of our feet, and not to turn to the right or the left. That is not simply ancient wisdom. It is a powerful instruction for a distracted generation. You cannot build a focused life with a scattered mind, and you cannot walk confidently into God's purpose while constantly allowing every notification, opinion, trend, and comparison to redirect your attention. Above all, you must understand that God is not asking you to become someone else. He is calling you to become faithful with what He has placed inside you. Your journey may not look like the person you admire, and your timeline may not match the person you follow, but that does not mean you are failing. Comparison will tempt you to abandon your process because somebody else's results appeared faster than yours. You may look at someone who seems to have everything you have been praying for and conclude that God is doing more for them than He is doing for you. But you do not know the preparation behind their present position, and you do not know what God is developing behind the scenes in your own life. Galatians 6:4 teaches us to examine our own work rather than constantly measuring ourselves against someone else. Your assignment is not to become their version of successful. Your assignment is to become faithful to what God has placed before you. So stop asking, why am I not where they are? And start asking, what is God asking me to do with where I am? Consequently, the right question is not simply, God, when will you give me more? The deeper question is, God, make me ready for what you are preparing to entrust to me. Ask Him to develop your discipline before He increases your responsibility. Ask Him to strengthen your character before He expands your influence. Ask Him to teach you stewardship before He multiplies what you have. Ask Him to give you wisdom before you receive the opportunity you have been requesting. Because sometimes God is not withholding the blessing. He is preparing the person who will carry it. And when you understand that your current season stops looking like punishment and starts looking like preparation, the missed opportunity becomes a lesson. The delayed breakthrough becomes a test of endurance. The ordinary assignment becomes a training ground, and the small daily disciplines become bricks in the foundation of your future. You may not be where you want to be yet, but you can decide today that you will no longer waste the position where God has placed you. Start where you are. Use what you have. Become faithful with what is already in your hands, and trust God to determine when you are ready for what comes next. Now let us go deeper, because divine positioning is not simply about where you are physically. It is about where you are spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and practically. You can be in the right city and still be in the wrong mindset. You can be surrounded by opportunities and still be too distracted to recognize them. You can have the right people around you and still be too insecure to receive what they are trying to teach you. You can be moving every day and still be moving in the wrong direction. That is why Proverbs 3:5-6 tells us to trust in the Lord with all our heart, not to lean entirely on our own understanding, and to acknowledge Him in all our ways so that He can direct our paths. Notice that the promise is not simply that God will give you everything you want. The promise is that He will direct your path. Sometimes direction is more valuable than speed, because arriving quickly at the wrong destination is still failure. Think about how many people today are exhausted because they are chasing everything at once. They are chasing money, attention, relationships, status, followers, approval, success, comfort, and the latest opportunity. But they have never stopped long enough to ask whether those things actually belong to their assignment. One person sees someone making money online and immediately abandons what they were building to chase the same thing. Another sees someone getting married and suddenly feels pressured to force a relationship because they are afraid of being left behind. Someone sees another person's business growing and begins copying their strategy without understanding their own market, strengths, or calling. Another person sees a friend traveling around the world and starts feeling like their own life is meaningless because they cannot afford the same lifestyle. This is how comparison turns into confusion. You start running after things simply because someone else is running after them. And eventually you become so busy chasing what belongs to somebody else that you neglect what God actually placed in your hands. However, there is a powerful freedom that comes when you realize you do not have to chase everything. You do not have to attend every opportunity. You do not have to answer every invitation. You do not have to prove yourself to everyone. You do not have to explain every decision. You do not have to compete with people who are not running your race. There are doors you should not enter simply because they opened. There are opportunities you should not accept simply because they look impressive. There are relationships you should not pursue simply because you are lonely. There are ambitions you should not adopt simply because they are popular. And there are things you may have to release because they are consuming energy that your purpose needs. Jesus demonstrated this kind of focus when he understood that he could not respond to every demand in every place at every moment. In Mark 1:35-38, Jesus withdrew to pray. And when people were looking for him, he made it clear that he needed to go elsewhere because that was part of his mission. He understood that being needed everywhere did not mean he was assigned to be everywhere. Similarly, you must learn to distinguish between what is urgent and what is important. Your phone may tell you that someone has posted something new, but that does not mean you need to see it. Someone may send you a message, but that does not mean you need to abandon your priority immediately. The world will constantly compete for your attention, and if you do not decide what deserves your attention, other people will decide for you. This is why focus is spiritual as well as practical. Every time you say yes to something, you are saying no to something else. When you spend 2 hours scrolling, those 2 hours cannot also be spent building your skill. When you spend your entire evening comparing yourself to someone online, you cannot use that same evening to develop your own assignment. When you constantly explain yourself to people who have already decided to misunderstand you, you are spending emotional energy that could have been invested into your purpose.
Divine positioning sometimes requires you to become comfortable with saying no so that you can say yes to what matters most. Moreover, there will be moments when God asks you to slow down because you have been moving from pressure instead of purpose. You may feel that you need to hurry because everyone else appears to be ahead, but God's timing is not controlled by social media trends. Someone else's breakthrough does not create a deadline for your life. Someone else's relationship does not mean you should force yours. Someone else's financial success does not mean you should make reckless decisions. Someone else's platform does not mean you need to abandon your message. Psalm 37:23 says that the steps of a good person are ordered by the Lord, and that means your journey has direction even when you cannot see the entire road. You may not know what God is doing 6 months from now, but you can obey him today. You may not understand why a door has not opened, but you can remain faithful where you are. You may not understand why your progress feels slow, but you can continue becoming the person God is shaping you to become. Therefore, stop measuring your life by how fast other people are moving, and start measuring it by whether you are moving faithfully in the direction God has given you. Ask yourself, what am I chasing that God never told me to pursue? Ask what distraction has become so normal that I no longer recognize it as a distraction.
Ask what relationship, habit, desire, or comparison is stealing my focus, and then have the courage to release what does not belong. Because divine positioning may require subtraction before multiplication. Sometimes God has to remove the noise so you can hear the instruction. Sometimes he has to close a door so you stop wasting your energy knocking on it. Sometimes he has to separate you from certain environments so you can recover your focus.
And snorts. Sometimes the greatest favor God can give you is not another opportunity, but the wisdom to recognize which opportunities you should refuse. So pray, God, keep me in the right position. Keep me from chasing what is not mine. Keep my eyes on the assignment you have given me. Give me the discipline to stay focused when everybody else is running in another direction. And give me the wisdom to know the difference between a door that is open and a door that you actually opened. There is a quiet battle that can destroy your peace, weaken your confidence, and make you question God's work in your life. And that battle is comparison. You can wake up believing that God is good, believing that your life has purpose, believing that your season will come, and then spend 10 minutes scrolling through social media and suddenly feel like you have accomplished nothing. You see someone announcing a promotion, another person celebrating a wedding, someone buying a house, another launching a business, someone receiving an opportunity you have prayed about for years. And before you realize what is happening, gratitude begins turning into frustration. You start asking God, what about me? You begin measuring your chapter against someone else's highlight reel, forgetting that you are looking at their visible results while God is still writing your invisible process. But hear me carefully. Their progress is not proof of your failure, and their timing is not a deadline for your destiny. God did not call you to live somebody else's life. He called you to faithfully walk the path he has assigned to you. The danger of comparison is that it does not simply make you feel behind. It can make you abandon the very process that is preparing you. Imagine someone who's been working on a business for 2 years, but then sees another person succeed in 6 months and decides their own idea must not be working.
They change direction every few weeks because they are constantly reacting to somebody else's success. Imagine someone who has been developing a career slowly and faithfully, but after watching someone else receive a promotion, they become bitter toward their own workplace and stop giving their best. Imagine someone who has been praying for marriage and begins comparing themselves with friends who are already married, allowing loneliness to pressure them into accepting a relationship they know is not right. This is how comparison can move you out of position. You become so focused on what God is doing in someone else's life that you stop paying attention to what he is doing in yours. You begin forcing doors because someone else's door opened, and you forget that what looks like a delay may actually be divine protection, preparation, or redirection. The Bible gives us a powerful principle in Galatians 6:4-5, where we are instructed to examine our own work and not measure ourselves by somebody else's standard. That is a word for this generation, because we live in a culture that constantly tells us to compare. Compare your body, compare your career, compare your income, compare your relationships, compare your children, compare your home, compare your influence, compare your achievements, and compare your progress. But comparison is a terrible measuring tool because you rarely have all the information. You do not know what someone sacrificed to get where they are. You do not know what battles they are fighting behind closed doors. You do not know whether what looks like success externally is producing peace internally. You do not know whether the opportunity you envy would actually be healthy for you in this season. And most importantly, you do not know what God is preparing you for while you are busy wishing you had what somebody else has. Your responsibility is not to compete with another person's assignment. Your responsibility is to be faithful with yours.
Likewise, delayed breakthroughs can become dangerous when you misunderstand what waiting means. You have prayed, you have believed, you have worked, you have remained faithful, and still the answer has not appeared in the way you expected. You applied for the opportunity and received no response. You started the business, and the growth has been slower than you imagined. You worked hard, and someone else was promoted first. You prayed for restoration, and the situation still looks broken. You asked God for provision, and the financial pressure has not disappeared overnight. At that point, discouragement whispers, "Why keep going?" But Galatians chapter 6:9, it says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, For at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Notice that the scripture does not promise that the harvest will come according to your preferred schedule. It says there is a proper time. That means your assignment during the waiting season is not to predict the harvest, but to remain faithful in the planting. Furthermore, there is something powerful about continuing when there is no immediate evidence that your effort is working. Anybody can be consistent when results are visible, but maturity is revealed when you continue doing what is right before the results arrive. Think about the person who keeps studying even after failing an examination. Think about the entrepreneur who keeps improving the product after the first launch does not succeed. Think about the person who keeps applying for jobs after several rejections. Think about the believer who continues praying even when the answer seems delayed. That kind of persistence is not weakness, it is spiritual endurance. James 1:3-4 teaches that the testing of faith produces perseverance, and perseverance develops maturity. Sometimes the season you want to escape is developing the endurance you will need for the season you are praying to enter. So do not waste your waiting by becoming bitter. Use it to become better. Let the delay teach you patience. Let the rejection teach you resilience. Let the quiet season teach you discipline. And let the unanswered question drive you deeper into dependence on God rather than deeper into comparison. Ultimately, you must make a decision about what voice will define your progress. Will you listen to the voice of comparison telling you that you are behind? Or will you listen to the voice of God reminding you that your steps are still being ordered? Will you measure your worth by what somebody else has achieved? Or will you measure your faithfulness by how well you are stewarding what God has entrusted to you? There will always be somebody ahead of you in one area and somebody behind you in another. So if your peace depends on being ahead of everyone, you will never have peace. Instead, wake up and ask a better question. Lord, what are you asking me to do with this day? Then do that. Pray, prepare, work, learn, serve, improve, and keep moving. You do not need to outrun everyone. You need to remain faithful to your assignment. Your delay is not automatically denial. Your slow progress is not automatically failure. And another person's blessing is not evidence that God has run out of blessings for you. Stay in your lane, stay in your position, stay faithful to your process, and trust God with the timing of your harvest. Because when you stop comparing your journey with somebody else's, you finally have the freedom to give your full attention to the life God is actually calling you to build. Now, we come to one of the most important battles you will ever face in the pursuit of purpose. What do you do when motivation disappears? Because motivation is powerful when it is present. But motivation was never designed to carry your entire life. Snorts. There will be mornings when you wake up excited about your vision, and there will be other mornings when you look at the same vision and feel absolutely nothing. There will be days when prayer feels easy, work feels productive, your mind feels focused, and everything seems to be moving in the right direction. But there will also be days when you are tired, discouraged, distracted, disappointed, and tempted to say, I will do it tomorrow. That is where discipline becomes more important than emotion, because purpose cannot depend on whether you feel inspired every morning. If you only obey God when you feel motivated, you will become inconsistent every time your emotions change. The mature person learns to say, I may not feel like doing this today, but I know this matters, and I am going to do it anyway. Consider the person who creates a beautiful plan every Sunday night and feels completely inspired about the week ahead. They write down their goals, organize their schedule, promise themselves they will wake up early, exercise, pray, read, work, and avoid distractions. Monday morning comes and they are motivated, so everything goes well. Wait, Tuesday is still manageable, but by Wednesday, the excitement begins to disappear. Thursday becomes difficult, and by Friday, they have abandoned half the commitments they made to themselves. Then the following Sunday arrives, and they create another plan, hoping this time will be different.
The problem is not always that the plan was bad. The problem is that the plan was built around motivation rather than discipline. You cannot keep restarting your life every time your feelings change. You need habits that continue working even when your emotions are not cooperating. That is why Proverbs 6:6-8 tells us to consider the ant, because the ant does not need constant emotional encouragement to prepare for the future. It works because preparation is necessary, not because someone is standing over it demanding performance. Likewise, discipline does not mean that you become a machine without emotions, and it does not mean that you never rest or experience difficult days.
Discipline means that you refuse to allow every feeling to become a command. You can feel afraid and still move. You can feel tired and still complete what genuinely needs to be completed. You can feel discouraged and still pray. You can feel uncertain and still take the next responsible step. You can feel unmotivated and still honor your commitment. This is where 1 Corinthians chapter 9, 24-27 becomes relevant, because Paul compares the Christian life to discipline training and speaks about bringing his body under control. The principle is powerful. If an athlete wants to compete at a high level, they cannot train only on the days they feel inspired. They train because the goal demands it. In the same way, if you believe God has entrusted you with a purpose, you must develop the discipline required to steward that purpose. Meanwhile, think about how many opportunities are lost, not because people lack ability, but because they lack consistency. Someone may have the talent to become an excellent writer, but they only write when inspiration comes. Someone may have the potential to build a successful business, but they work only when they feel encouraged. Someone may have the intelligence to complete a degree, but they study only when an examination is close. Someone may have a powerful ministry inside them, but they refuse to develop because nobody is applauding them yet. Talent can open attention, but consistency builds trust. Potential may create possibilities, but discipline turns possibilities into reality. You cannot pray for God to multiply what you continually neglect. If you want God to trust you with more, become faithful with what is already available to you. Sometimes the reason you are frustrated with the size of your opportunity is because you have not yet demonstrated faithfulness with the size of your responsibility. Still, there is another dimension to discipline that we must understand. Discipline protects your future from your present impulses. Every time you choose what is easy over what is necessary, you are making a withdrawal from your future. Every time you postpone an important task because entertainment feels better, you are borrowing peace from tomorrow and paying for it with pressure later. Think about the missed deadline that could have been avoided if you had started 3 days earlier. Think about the financial stress that could have been reduced if you had controlled unnecessary spending. Think about the unfinished project that would already be complete if you had worked on it for 1 focused hour each day. Think about the spiritual weakness that could have been prevented if you had consistently prayed instead of waiting for a crisis to force you to seek God. Small decisions accumulate, and eventually they become circumstances. That is why discipline is not punishment. Discipline is protection. It protects your time, your peace, your purpose, your relationships, your opportunities, and the future you are building. Therefore, stop waiting to feel ready before you begin doing what you already know you should do. If you know you need to pray, pray. If you know you need to study, study. If you know you need to apply, apply. If you know you need to apologize, apologize. If you know you need to organize your finances, begin. If you know you need to stop wasting hours on distractions, put the phone down. If you know you need to finish something you started, return to it and take the next step. You do not have to transform your entire life in one day. You need to become faithful with today's assignment. Galatians 6:9 reminds us not to grow weary in doing good, because there is a harvest in due season if we do not give up. Your responsibility is consistency. God's responsibility is the harvest. Your responsibility is obedience. God's responsibility is the outcome. Your responsibility is to stay in position even when motivation disappears. Because sometimes the greatest breakthrough begins on the day you decide to continue without the emotional excitement that made you start. In the end, I want you to remember this. Motivation can start you, but discipline keeps you moving when motivation leaves. Feelings can inspire you, but convictions must direct you. Excitement can get you out of the chair, but commitment keeps you working when the results are slow. And faith does not mean sitting around, waiting for God to do everything. Faith means trusting God enough to obey Him consistently. So when you wake up tomorrow and you do not feel like doing what you know you are called to do not immediately assume that you have lost your passion. Perhaps you have simply reached the place where passion must mature into discipline. Pray, God, give me grace to remain faithful when nobody is watching, strength to continue when results are delayed, wisdom to prioritize what matters, and discipline to finish what you have placed in my hands. Because the person who learns to remain faithful after motivation disappears becomes dangerous to procrastination, resistant to distraction, and increasingly prepared for purpose. You, snorts, do not need to feel powerful every day. You need to remain positioned every day. There is another force that quietly keeps people out of position, and that force is fear. Fear does not always announce itself by making you run away. Sometimes fear makes you stay exactly where you are. Sometimes fear looks like procrastination. Sometimes it looks like overthinking. Sometimes it looks like endlessly researching without ever starting. Sometimes it sounds like I am just waiting for the right time, when deep inside you know you are afraid that your first attempt might fail. You have the idea. You have the opportunity, you have the ability to begin, but you keep imagining everything that could go wrong. What if they reject me? What if I fail? What if people laugh at me? What if I lose money? What if nobody supports me? What if I obey God and it does not work out the way I expected? And because you cannot guarantee the outcome, you decide not to take the step at all. But hear this clearly. You cannot walk into a purpose you are unwilling to risk pursuing. Think about the person who has wanted to start a business for years, but keeps saying, I need to learn a little more first. They watch hundreds of videos, attend courses, research competitors, design logos, create plans, and talk about the business constantly, but they never actually launch. At some point, preparation has stopped being wisdom and become an excuse. Think about the person who knows they should apply for a new position, but refuses because they are convinced they will not get it. Think about the person who has a book inside them, but keeps waiting for perfect writing conditions. Think about the person who has an idea that could solve a real problem, but refuses to share it because they are afraid somebody might criticize it. Fear convinces you that avoiding failure is safer than pursuing purpose. But what fear does not tell you is that avoiding every possibility of failure also eliminates every possibility of growth. You cannot learn to swim by standing permanently on the edge of the pool. And you cannot discover what God can do through your obedience if you never take the first step. The Bible speaks directly to this struggle in 2 Timothy 1:7, which says that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. Notice that Scripture does not say you will never experience fear. It tells you that fear does not have to control you. Fear may speak, but it does not have to make the decision. Fear may tell you that you are not ready, but wisdom can ask, what is the next step I can take? Fear may tell you that failure will destroy you, but faith reminds you that failure can become instruction. Fear may tell you that everyone will reject you, but purpose reminds you that you do not need everyone to approve what God has called you to do. A sound mind does not mean that you have every answer. It means you can think clearly enough to obey despite uncertainty. Sometimes courage is not the absence of trembling. Courage is taking the step while your hands are still trembling. In addition, you need to understand that failure and disobedience are not the same thing. You can obey God and still encounter difficulty. You can make a wise decision and still experience rejection. You can work hard and still have a season when the results are disappointing. You can start something with good intentions and discover that your first strategy was wrong. That does not automatically mean you missed God. Sometimes you learn through the process. Proverbs 24:16 says that though a righteous person falls 7 times, they rise again.
The emphasis is not that the righteous never fall. The emphasis is that they do not stay down. The person who fears failure often imagines that one mistake will define their entire future. But resilient people understand that a setback is information, not identity. You failed at something. That does not mean you are a failure. Something did not work. That does not mean your entire calling is invalid. You made a mistake. That does not mean God has abandoned you. Similarly, fear often becomes stronger when you keep everything inside your imagination. In your mind, the problem becomes enormous because you have not tested reality. You imagine the rejection before you apply. You imagine the criticism before you publish. You imagine the loss before you invest responsibly. You imagine the embarrassment before you speak. You imagine the failure before you even begin. But action has a way of replacing imagined fear with real information. Once you take the first step, you can learn. Once you apply, you know whether the answer is yes or no.
Once you launch, you discover what needs improvement. Once you start exercising, you discover what your body can handle. Once you begin studying consistently, you discover that what seemed impossible becomes manageable through repetition. Faith often becomes clearer after movement because obedience gives you information that fear could never provide. Furthermore, do not confuse perfection with excellence. Excellence says, I will give this my best and keep improving. Perfectionism says, I will not begin until I can guarantee that my best will be perfect. Excellence moves. Perfectionism delays. Excellence learns from correction. Perfectionism avoids situations where correction might happen. Excellence understands that growth requires mistakes. Perfectionism interprets mistakes as evidence that it should never have started. That is why some people remain trapped in potential for years. They have everything they need to begin. But they keep waiting to become someone who never makes mistakes. But nobody becomes excellent without being inexperienced first. Nobody becomes disciplined without first learning consistency. Nobody becomes courageous without confronting fear. Nobody becomes skilled without being willing to look like a beginner. Therefore, I want you to identify one thing fear has been keeping you from doing. Maybe it is applying for that opportunity. Maybe it is starting the project. Maybe it is making the difficult phone call. Maybe it is returning to school. Maybe it is launching the business. Maybe it is writing the first page. Maybe it is finally creating the routine you have promised yourself you would follow. Maybe it is simply admitting that the way you have been living is no longer sustainable. Whatever it is, bring it before God and say, Lord, I refuse to allow fear to decide my future. Then ask for wisdom. Make a responsible plan and take one step, not 10 steps, not the entire journey, one step. Joshua 1:9 reminds us to be strong and courageous because God is with us wherever we go. The courage comes not from knowing exactly what will happen next, but from knowing that you do not walk into the unknown alone. Finally, remember that your purpose will require you to do things you have never done before. That means you will sometimes feel uncomfortable. You will sometimes feel inexperienced. You will sometimes wonder whether you are capable. That is normal. Do not wait for fear to disappear before you move. Move with faith while fear is still trying to convince you to stay. Pray, prepare, seek wise counsel, count the cost, and then take the step God has placed before you. You may discover that the thing you were terrified of was not the end of your story, but the beginning of your growth. And even if the first attempt does not produce the result you wanted, you will have gained something priceless. Experience, resilience, wisdom, and evidence that you can keep moving. The enemy of your purpose does not always need to destroy your dream. Sometimes all he needs to do is convince you to postpone it indefinitely. So do not let fear keep you out of position. Step forward. Learn as you go. Trust God with what you cannot control. And remember, you cannot discover the strength God has placed in you while constantly protecting yourself from every opportunity that requires courage.
Meanwhile, there is another danger we must confront, because not everyone who is struggling to move forward is lazy, distracted, or afraid. Some people are simply exhausted. Some of you have been carrying responsibilities for so long that you have forgotten what it feels like to breathe without feeling guilty. You wake up already tired, go to work, take care of your family, answer messages, solve problems, meet expectations, serve other people, and then wonder why you have no energy left for the purpose God placed inside you.
You have become so accustomed to being needed that you no longer recognize when you need rest. You keep saying, I just need to push a little harder. But your body is asking for recovery, your mind is asking for quiet, and your spirit is asking you to return to God. There is a difference between being disciplined and being driven by pressure, and if you do not understand that difference, you can spend years exhausting yourself while calling it productivity. God did not call you to destroy yourself trying to prove that you are worthy of the life He has given you. Think about the person who has 3 different responsibilities competing for their attention every day. They're working long hours trying to build something on the side, caring for family, managing financial pressure, and attempting to maintain a spiritual life at the same time. They look at successful people online and see someone waking up at 4 in the morning, exercising, reading 5 books, running a business, traveling, and somehow appearing to have unlimited energy. Then they feel guilty because their own life does not look like that. They begin forcing themselves beyond healthy limits because they believe slowing down means they are falling behind. But you cannot compare your capacity to somebody else's highlight reel. You do not know their circumstances, their support system, their responsibilities, or their season. More importantly, God does not measure your obedience by how exhausted you become. Exhaustion is not automatically evidence of sacrifice, and busyness is not automatically evidence of purpose. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is recognize that you have been trying to carry something God never asked you to carry alone. Consider what Jesus says in Matthew 11:28-30, where He invites those who are weary and burdened to come to Him, learn from Him, and find rest for their souls. That is a remarkable invitation, because Jesus does not shame the weary person for being tired.
He does not say you should have worked harder. He says, come. There are seasons when you need to work, and there are seasons when you need to recover so that you can continue working with wisdom. There are moments when you need to push through resistance, but there are also moments when you need to recognize that your exhaustion is telling you something. Even Jesus understood the importance of withdrawing from the noise and spending time alone with the Father. Mark 1:35 tells us that Jesus rose early, went to a solitary place, and prayed. If Jesus intentionally created space for prayer and solitude, you should not feel guilty about recognizing your own need for spiritual renewal and healthy rest. Rest is not always a retreat from purpose. Sometimes, rest is preparation to return to purpose with greater clarity. Furthermore, burnout often develops when you say yes to everything because you are afraid of disappointing people. You answer every call, accept every request, attend every event, solve everyone's problems, and carry responsibilities that should belong to other people. Eventually, you have so little capacity left that the assignment God actually gave you receives whatever energy remains. You become frustrated because you are busy all day, but still feel unproductive at the end of the day. That is because activity and effectiveness are not the same thing. Jesus himself understood boundaries. In Luke 5:15-16, even as crowds gathered and his influence increased, he would withdraw to lonely places and pray. Notice the principle. Increased demand did not eliminate his need for communion with the Father. The more people needed from him, the more intentional he became about maintaining his connection with God. You cannot pour endlessly without returning to the source, and you cannot continually give what you have not allowed God to replenish. Likewise, burnout can make you lose your ability to recognize what actually matters. When you are exhausted, everything feels urgent. A small problem feels enormous. A delayed response feels like rejection. A normal inconvenience feels like a crisis. You become more irritable, less focused, and more likely to make decisions from emotion rather than wisdom. That is why rest is not simply about physical comfort. It can restore perspective. Sometimes you do not need another strategy. You need sleep. Sometimes you do not need another motivational video. You need to step away from the noise and pray. Sometimes you do not need to work another 12 hours. You need to recognize what can wait until tomorrow. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." Being still does not mean abandoning responsibility. It means remembering that you are not God and that the entire world does not depend on your ability to control everything. You can do your part faithfully without carrying the illusion that everything must be solved by you tonight. Equally important, you must learn to distinguish between God's conviction and human pressure. Conviction draws you toward obedience, while unhealthy pressure often drives you toward panic. Conviction says, this is what you need to change. Pressure says, if you do not do everything right now, your life is over. Conviction can produce disciplined action, but pressure can produce frantic activity. Conviction gives direction, while pressure creates confusion. That distinction matters, because some people are exhausting themselves trying to prove to God, to their family, to their friends, or to society that they are successful enough. Snorts. But you do not have to earn God's love through exhaustion. Romans 8:1 reminds us that there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Your value does not increase because you accomplish 10 things today, and your value does not disappear because you need it to rest. Your identity must be rooted in God before your productivity can be healthy. As a result, I want you to rethink what disciplined living actually looks like. Discipline may mean waking up early when that is genuinely necessary, but it may also mean going to bed at a reasonable time so you can function well tomorrow. Discipline may mean working hard on your assignment, but it may also mean putting your phone away so that you can work with focus instead of wasting 3 hours and then trying to compensate with exhaustion. Discipline may mean saying yes to an important responsibility, but it may also mean saying no to something that would pull you away from your priorities. Discipline may mean pushing through temporary discomfort, but it may also mean recognizing when your body and mind need recovery. Purpose-driven living is not about doing everything. It is about doing what matters faithfully. You do not need to be everywhere, answer everyone, or accomplish everything to be obedient to God. You need the wisdom to know what He has assigned to you in this season and the courage to protect that assignment. Therefore, ask yourself a difficult question. Am I tired because I am faithfully doing what God has called me to do? Or am I exhausted because I am trying to prove something, please everyone, or carry things He never asked me to carry? That question can change your life. Maybe your next act of obedience is not another hour of work, but an hour of rest. Maybe your next step is not accepting another responsibility, but establishing a boundary. Maybe your breakthrough is not going to come through doing more, but through eliminating what is unnecessary. Maybe God is trying to position you, but you are too exhausted to recognize the position He is leading you toward. So pray, Lord, teach me the difference between discipline and striving. Give me strength when I need to persevere, wisdom when I need to rest, courage when I need to say no, and grace to stop proving what you have already established. Keep me in the right position, not merely a busy position. Keep me aligned with purpose, not addicted to activity. Above all, remember that your life is not a race against everyone around you. You are not required to destroy yourself to prove that you are serious about your calling. God cares about the condition of your heart while you pursue the assignment He has given you. He wants you productive, but He also wants you whole. He wants you disciplined, but He does not want you enslaved to pressure. He wants you ambitious for His purposes, but He does not want comparison to become the engine of your life. There will be seasons when you need to work intensely, and there will be seasons when you need to slow down and recover. The wisdom is knowing the difference. So do not confuse exhaustion with faithfulness, and do not confuse rest with laziness. Sometimes staying in the right position means stepping away from the noise long enough to hear God's voice again, allowing Him to restore your strength, renew your mind, and remind you that your purpose is not sustained by your strength alone. You were never designed to carry God's purpose without God's presence, and you do not have to destroy yourself proving that you are worthy of what God has called you to become. Today, I want you to understand that divine positioning is not something you wait made for once in a lifetime. It is something you practice every single day. You do not wake up accidentally aligned with God's purpose, because alignment requires intentional decisions about what you think, what you watch, what you pursue, what you prioritize, and what you allow to influence you. Every morning gives you another opportunity to decide who will direct your attention before the world begins demanding it from you. Before the notifications arrive, before the opinions begin, before the pressure of work begins, before comparison enters your mind, you have an opportunity to give God the first place in your thinking.
Romans 12:2 tells us not to conform to the pattern of this world, but to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. And that means transformation begins with what happens inside you before it becomes visible around you. If your mind remains controlled by fear, comparison, distraction, and negativity, your actions will eventually reflect those things. But when your mind is continually renewed by God's truth, your decisions begin to change, your habits begin to change, and eventually your direction begins to change. First, you must position your mind before you position your schedule. Many people begin the day by allowing the world to tell them what deserves their attention, because the first thing they do is reach for their phone and immediately consume other people's thoughts, problems, achievements, arguments, and opinions. Before they have even spoken to God, they have already compared themselves to 5 people, responded to 3 messages, watched several videos, and allowed somebody else's success to determine how they feel about their own life. Then they wonder why they cannot focus. You cannot expect to have a peaceful mind when you begin every morning by feeding it chaos. Proverbs 4:23 says to guard your heart because everything you do flows from it, and guarding your inner life requires intentionality. Start your day by asking God for wisdom, clarity, strength, and direction before you allow the noise of the world to compete for your attention. You are not simply starting another day. You are deciding what kind of person you will be throughout that day. Secondly, position your priorities before your distractions. Position them for you. You need to know what actually matters before the day becomes crowded with things that appear urgent. There may be 20 things you could do today, but perhaps only 3 truly require your attention. Maybe you need to complete an important work assignment, spend meaningful time with your family, and invest time in the purpose God has placed in your heart. If you do not identify those priorities, the easiest tasks will consume your time, while the most important tasks remain unfinished. This is how people become busy without becoming productive. They answer every small request, check every notification, attend to every distraction, and then reach the end of the day wondering where their time went. Ephesians chapter 5:15-16 tells us to be careful how we live and to make the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil, reminding us that time must be stewarded rather than casually spent. Your time is one of the most valuable things God has entrusted to you, so do not give your best hours to things that produce nothing of lasting value. Thirdly, position your habits because your future will eventually be shaped by what you repeatedly do. You do not become disciplined by making one dramatic decision. You become disciplined by making small, obedient decisions until they become part of your character. If you want to become a person who read consistently, even when you can only manage a few pages. If you want to become healthier, begin making better choices instead of waiting for the perfect fitness plan. If you want to build a business, dedicate consistent time to learning, creating, serving, and improving instead of spending all your time imagining the finished result. If you want a deeper relationship with God, establish regular moments for prayer and scripture rather than waiting until you are desperate. Luke 16:10 reminds us that whoever is faithful with very little will also be faithful with much. And that principle applies directly to daily habits. Your small choices may look insignificant today, but repeated long enough, they become your lifestyle. And your lifestyle eventually influences your future. Fourthly, position your environment, because sometimes discipline becomes unnecessarily difficult when you keep surrounding yourself with things that constantly invite distraction. If you are trying to focus, but your phone is beside you with every notification turned on, you are creating a battle you do not need to fight. If you are trying to save money, but constantly expose yourself to things that encourage impulsive spending, you are making your goal harder.
If you are trying to stop comparing yourself to others, but spend hours consuming content that makes you feel inadequate, you are feeding the very mindset you are trying to overcome. 1 Corinthians 15:33 warns that bad company corrupts good character. And while that principle certainly applies to relationships, it also reminds us that our surroundings influence us. Sometimes changing your environment is not weakness, it is wisdom. Remove what repeatedly pulls you away from purpose. Create an environment that supports your priorities, and make obedience easier by reducing unnecessary opportunities for distraction. Fifthly, position your spirit before you position yourself in front of people. There is a difference between waking up and immediately asking, "What does everyone need from me today?" and waking up asking, "Lord, what do you want from me today?" That one question can completely change your priorities. When you begin with God, you stop allowing every external demand to become an internal command. You begin asking whether an opportunity is aligned with your assignment, whether a relationship is healthy for your purpose, whether a decision reflects wisdom, and whether your ambition is being driven by calling or comparison. Proverbs 16:3 says, "To commit your works to the Lord, and your plans will be established," which means your productivity should not be separated from your dependence on God. Pray before you plan. Seek wisdom before you rush. And surrender your agenda before demanding that God bless it.
You are not asking God to become part of your plan. You are asking Him to help you discover whether your plan belongs under His direction. Meanwhile, understand that daily alignment does not mean every day will be perfect. There will be mornings when you oversleep, days when you become distracted, moments when you lose your temper, and seasons when you fail to maintain the habits you promised yourself you would maintain. Do not allow one bad day to become an excuse for abandoning the entire journey. If you miss one workout, return the next day. If you waste an afternoon, recover the evening. If you miss a prayer time, pray when you remember. Clears throat. If you fall back into an old habit, acknowledge it and begin again. Proverbs 24:16 reminds us that a righteous person may fall and still rise again, and that principle should change how you view setbacks. Discipline is not perfection. Discipline is the willingness to return. The enemy would love for one mistake to convince you that you are incapable of consistency. But you must learn to separate a temporary failure from a permanent identity. Furthermore, create a simple rhythm that brings your faith and your responsibilities together instead of treating them as separate parts of your life. Begin the morning with prayer and intentional reflection. Identify the most important assignment of the day and give that assignment focused attention before unnecessary distractions take over. During the day, pause long enough to ask whether your current activity is actually moving you toward your priorities or simply consuming your attention. At the end of the day, review your decisions without condemning yourself and ask, what did I do well? Where did I lose focus? And what can I improve tomorrow? Psalm 90:12 says, "Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom." And that is a powerful daily practice. Numbering your days means recognizing that time is limited and therefore should be stewarded intentionally. You are not trying to control tomorrow. You are learning to faithfully manage today. Ultimately, this is what it means to pray, "God, keep me in the right position." You are asking God to keep your heart from pride, your mind from distraction, your eyes from comparison, your hands from laziness, your emotions from controlling your decisions, and your feet from wandering away from purpose. You are asking Him to make you sensitive enough to recognize the right opportunity and disciplined enough to prepare for it when it comes. You are asking Him to give you wisdom to know what deserves your attention and courage to ignore what does not. You are asking Him to help you become faithful in the ordinary so that you are not overwhelmed when the extraordinary arrives. And you are acknowledging that your position is not maintained by human strength alone, because you need God's grace every day to remain aligned. So tomorrow morning, do not simply wake up and hope the day goes well. Wake up and intentionally position yourself for it. Pray, renew your mind, establish your priorities, protect your attention, honor your responsibilities, and take the next obedient step.
Because when your daily habits begin agreeing with your prayers, your life begins moving in the direction of the purpose you have been asking God to reveal. Now we come to the heart of this message because we have talked about discipline, focus, fear, comparison, rest, and daily alignment. But all of these things lead us back to one powerful prayer. God, keep me in the right position and let your favor speak for me where my struggle cannot. There is something powerful about understanding that you do not have to force every door open, manipulate every opportunity, or convince every person of your worth.
There are moments when your preparation will put you in the room, but favor will cause the right person to recognize what God has placed inside you. There are moments when your ability will take you only so far, and then you need something beyond your ability. There are moments when you have done everything responsibly, worked diligently, prepared carefully, and still recognize that the outcome ultimately belongs to God. That is where humility enters the picture, because faith does not say I can do everything by myself. Faith says I will do everything God has asked me to do, and I will trust him with what only he can do. So when we ask God for favor, we are not asking him to reward laziness. We are asking him to breathe upon faithful preparation and bring divine influence into places where human effort alone cannot take us. Consider the difference between someone who wants an opportunity and someone who has prepared for an opportunity. Two people can pray for the same door, but one has spent months developing the necessary skills, while the other has spent months only wishing for the opportunity. One has been learning, practicing, improving, saving, preparing, and building quietly, while the other has been waiting for motivation to appear. When the door finally opens, preparation determines who can actually walk through it successfully. This is why Proverbs 16:3 says, "Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans." Notice that scripture says, whatever you do, there is action involved. You commit your work to God, but you still have work to commit. You bring your plans to God, but you still have to plan, prepare, and act. You pray for favor, but you also sharpen your skills, strengthen your character, organize your life, and become responsible with what you already possess. Favor does not replace preparation. Favor makes preparation fruitful in ways you could not accomplish by yourself.
For example, imagine someone who has applied for dozens of jobs and finally receives an invitation to an interview. They could say, "This is my breakthrough," and then walk into the interview completely unprepared. Or they could recognize the opportunity as something they prayed for and prepare accordingly. They research the organization, understand the role, practice communicating their experience, arrive on time, dress appropriately, and prepare thoughtful questions. They have done their part, but they still understand that they cannot control the final decision. Another person may have been building a business for years, learning from mistakes, serving customers, improving their product, and managing their finances carefully, and then suddenly someone with the resources and connections they need discovers their work. Was that opportunity entirely the result of human effort? No, because countless things had to align that the person could never have controlled. But was their preparation irrelevant? Absolutely not. Their preparation positioned them to recognize and steward the opportunity when it appeared. That is the balance we must understand. Prepare as though responsibility matters and pray as though God is the ultimate source. Similarly, Psalm 90:17 gives us another powerful prayer. May the favor of the Lord our God rest on us. Establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. Notice how beautifully those two ideas are connected, favor and work. The psalmist does not simply say, "Lord, give me something," without requiring anything from me. The prayer is establish the work of our hands. There are hands that must work, minds that must think, decisions that must be made, responsibilities that must be carried, and habits that must be developed. But we are asking God to establish what our hands are doing so that our effort is not empty or disconnected from his purpose. That should change the way you approach your work tomorrow morning. Do not simply say, "Sir, God bless my job." Say, "God help me work with excellence, integrity, wisdom, and purpose, and establish the work of my hands." My dear, yes, do not simply say, "God bless my business." Say,
God, teach me how to serve people well, manage resources wisely, make good decisions, and establish the work of my hands. And do not simply say, God, give me influence. Say, God, make me trustworthy enough to carry influence when it comes. Moreover, favor does not always look like getting what you requested. Sometimes favor looks like a door closing before you enter a situation that would have damaged you. Sometimes favor looks like a relationship ending before you build your future around the wrong person. Sometimes favor looks like an application being rejected because the position would have taken you away from something more important. Sometimes favor looks like God slowing you down because you are about to move from emotion rather than wisdom. Sometimes favor looks like being overlooked for something you desperately wanted because God knows what you cannot see. We often define favor as God gave me what I wanted, but biblical favor can also be God protected me from what I wanted. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us to trust the Lord rather than relying entirely on our own understanding, and to acknowledge Him in all our ways so He can direct our paths. That means you must become comfortable with trusting God, not only when He says yes, but also when His direction looks different from your expectation. A closed door can still be divine positioning. A delay can still be divine protection. A detour can still be divine direction. At the same time, never allow the language of favor to become an excuse for poor stewardship. You cannot consistently neglect your responsibilities and then call the consequences spiritual warfare. You cannot refuse to prepare and then blame God because the opportunity passed you by.
You cannot repeatedly waste your time and then ask God to restore opportunities that your own choices destroyed. There is a place for grace, there is a place for mercy, and there is a place for miraculous intervention, but there is also a place for responsibility. Galatians 6:7 says that a person reaps what they sow. And that principle should make us examine the seeds we are planting every day. What are you sowing into your mind? What are you sowing into your relationships? What are you sowing into your finances? What are you sowing into your health, your career, your spiritual life, and your purpose? Because eventually, your repeated decisions create patterns, and those patterns influence the harvest you experience. Pray for God's favor, but examine your seeds. Likewise, there will be seasons when your effort seems invisible, and that is where faith becomes essential. You may be doing the right things and still not see immediate results. You may be disciplined and still waiting. You may be faithful and still facing financial pressure. You may be improving and still overlooked. You may be praying and still waiting for the answer. Do not conclude that nothing is happening simply because you cannot see everything that is happening. Isaiah 40:31 reminds us that those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength, rise on wings like eagles, run and not grow weary, and walk and not faint. There is a strength that comes from waiting on God without abandoning responsibility. Waiting does not mean sitting helplessly. It means continuing faithfully while trusting God with the timing and outcome. Keep learning while you wait. Keep praying while you wait. Keep serving while you wait. Keep preparing while you wait. And keep your heart free from bitterness while you wait. Therefore, I want you to change the way you pray from this day forward. Instead of only praying, God, give me the opportunity, begin praying, God, make me ready for the opportunity. Instead of only saying, God, open the door, say, God, prepare my character before the door opens. Instead of saying, God, make people recognize me, say, God, make my work worthy of recognition. Instead of saying, God, give me more, say, God, teach me to steward what I already have. Instead of asking only for the harvest, ask God to make you faithful in the planting. And then when the opportunity comes, you will not have to panic because you have been preparing in private. You will not have to beg for recognition because you have been building something of value. You will not have to constantly struggle to prove yourself because your consistency, character, preparation, and God's favor will speak together. That is the prayer. Lord, position me so correctly that I do not have to manipulate what you have ordained, chase what you have not assigned, or force what you have not opened. Finally, understand that divine favor is not about becoming entitled.
It is about becoming entrusted. You are not praying, God, make me better than everyone else. You are praying, God, make me faithful with what you have given me. You are not asking God to put you above others so that you can feel important. You are asking him to place you where your gifts can serve, your character can mature, and your purpose can produce fruit. You are not asking for a life without difficulty. You are asking for grace to remain aligned when difficulty comes. And when your name is not enough, let God's favor speak. When your resources are limited, let his wisdom speak. When your strength is weak, let his grace speak. When the door seems impossible, let his direction speak. But as you pray for favor, keep your hands moving, keep your heart humble, keep your mind focused, keep your character clean, and keep your feet planted in obedience, because the goal is not merely to receive a blessing. The goal is to become the kind of person who can carry God's blessing without losing God's purpose. Now, I want to bring this message out of inspiration and into action, because a powerful message means very little if it only makes you feel something for a few minutes and then leaves your habits exactly where they were. You do not need another emotional moment that fades when tomorrow becomes difficult. You need a decision that survives tomorrow's resistance. So I want to challenge you to enter the next 30 days differently, not because 30 days is some magical formula, but because consistent obedience gives your faith somewhere to become visible. For the next 30 days, stop waiting for the perfect moment to become the person you keep saying you want to become. Stop waiting until you feel motivated, until your circumstances improve, until everyone supports you, until you have more money, until you have more time, or until you feel completely confident. Start with what you have. Start where you are, and begin taking intentional steps toward the purpose God has placed before you. Your life does not need another promise that you will change someday. It needs a decision that says, with God's help, I am going to start changing what I can change today. Every morning for these 30 days, begin by positioning your heart before positioning your schedule. Before you allow your phone to tell you what the world is doing, give God your attention and ask him to direct your steps. Pray something simple but powerful. Lord, keep me in the right position today. Guard my mind from distraction, my heart from comparison, my decisions from fear, and my hands from laziness. Show me what matters today. Give me strength to do it, and help me recognize what I need to ignore. Then identify the most important thing you need to accomplish that day. Not 20 things, not an overwhelming list designed to make you feel productive, but the responsibility that genuinely deserves your best attention. Ephesians 5:15-16 tells us to be careful how we live and to make the most of our time. And that means you must stop treating every demand as equally important. Some things can wait, some things can be delegated, some things can be removed, but there will always be something that requires you to take responsibility and act. Then, during those 30 days, make a deliberate decision to attack procrastination at its root. Whenever you catch yourself saying, I will do it later, stop and ask yourself why. Is the task genuinely impossible right now? Or are you uncomfortable because it requires effort? Are you waiting because you need more information? Or are you hiding because you are afraid of failure? Are you tired because you genuinely need rest? Or are you avoiding responsibility because entertainment feels easier? That question matters because you cannot defeat a cycle you refuse to identify. If the task takes 10 minutes, do it now. If it requires an hour, schedule the hour and protect it. If it is a major project, break it into smaller actions and complete the first one. Proverbs 14:23 says that all hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. The principle is simple. Intention is not execution. You can talk about what you are going to do for years, but your life changes when intention becomes action. Likewise, during these 30 days, create boundaries around distraction. You do not have to delete every application from your phone, disappear from society, or become disconnected from everyone. But you do need to stop pretending that constant stimulation has no effect on your focus. Give yourself periods when your phone is not controlling your attention. Turn off unnecessary notifications. Put the device away when you need to concentrate. Stop checking what everyone else is doing before you have done what God has placed in front of you. If social media consistently makes you compare your life with someone else's, reduce your exposure. If certain conversations continually pull you into negativity, limit them.
If entertainment keeps stealing the hours you intended to use for your goals, establish boundaries around it. Proverbs 4:25-27 tells us to keep our eyes looking straight ahead and to carefully consider the path of our feet. You cannot keep looking in every direction and expect to walk steadily toward one destination. Focus requires saying no to things that are not necessarily evil, but are simply not helpful for the assignment in front of you. During these 30 days, I also want you to stop measuring progress only by visible results. This is important because one of the fastest ways to quit is to expect immediate evidence. You may pray consistently for 30 days and still not see the breakthrough you wanted. You may work consistently for 30 days and still not receive the promotion. You may exercise for 30 days and still not look exactly the way you imagined. You may study for 30 days and still feel like you have a long way to go, but progress is not always visible immediately. Galatians 6:9 tells us not to become weary in doing good, because we will reap in due season if we do not give up. Your responsibility is not to force the harvest. Your responsibility is to keep sowing. Every prayer matters. Every disciplined decision matters. Every hour of focused work matters. Every time you choose obedience over distraction, you are reinforcing a new pattern. Every time you choose faith over fear, you are becoming stronger. Every time you return after falling, you are proving that one bad day does not control your future. At the same time, give yourself permission to start again quickly when you fail. Do not turn one bad decision into a bad week. Do not allow one missed day to become an excuse to abandon the entire 30-day challenge. Maybe you plan to wake up early and slept through the alarm. Get up and continue. Maybe you wasted 3 hours scrolling. Stop scrolling and reclaim the next hour. Maybe you broke your budget. Learn from it and make the next decision wisely.
Maybe you procrastinated on something important. Admit it, identify why, and begin the task. Proverbs 24:16 reminds us that a righteous person may fall and rise again. That is the attitude I want you to carry. You are not trying to prove that you will never fail. You are building the capacity to recover quickly when you do. Consistency is not never falling. Consistency is refusing to remain down. Do not allow shame to become another form of procrastination. Get back up. More importantly, use these 30 days to rebuild your relationship with yourself. If you have repeatedly promised yourself that you would do something and repeatedly broken that promise, your confidence can begin to weaken. You stop trusting your own word. You tell yourself, I always start and quit, or I can never stay disciplined, or this is just who I am. But identity can be rebuilt through repeated action. Every time you keep a small commitment, you send yourself a new message. I can trust myself to follow through. Every time you complete something you said you would complete, you strengthen your discipline. Every time you resist an unnecessary distraction, you strengthen your focus. Every time you do the difficult thing instead of the easy thing, you strengthen your character. Luke 16:10 reminds us that faithfulness in little things matters. So do not underestimate the power of small promises kept consistently. You may not feel transformed after one day, but 30 days of faithful decisions can change how you see yourself. Furthermore, make your evenings a time of reflection rather than regret. Before you sleep, take a few minutes and ask yourself, did I honor God with my priorities today? What did I accomplish? Where did I lose focus? What distracted me? What did fear make me avoid? Where did comparison steal my peace? What is one thing I can do differently tomorrow? Do not use these questions to condemn yourself. Use them to develop wisdom. Psalm 90:12 says, "Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom." A reflective life becomes an increasingly intentional life because you stop repeating mistakes without learning from them. You begin noticing patterns. You recognize what times of day you are most focused. You recognize which environments make discipline easier. You recognize which relationships drain your attention. You recognize which habits consistently move you forward and which ones repeatedly pull you backward. That awareness gives you the ability to make better decisions. Finally, snorts. After 30 days, do not simply ask, "Did I get everything I wanted?" Ask a deeper question. Who did I become? Did you become more disciplined? Did you become more focused? Did you become more prayerful? Did you become less controlled by comparison? Did you become more courageous? Did you become more faithful with your responsibilities? Did you become better at resting without guilt? Did you become more sensitive to God's direction? Because the greatest victory may not be that every circumstance changed. The greatest victory may be that you changed. You may discover that the person who started the 30 days is not the person who finishes them. And perhaps that is exactly what God has been trying to accomplish all along. Maybe the prayer was never simply, "Lord, change my situation." Maybe the deeper prayer was, "Lord, change me so I can faithfully walk through whatever situation you allow me to enter." So here is your charge. Do not wait for January. Do not wait for Monday. Do not wait for next month. And do not wait until you feel ready. Start with the next decision. Pray today. Organize today. Forgive today. Apply today. Study today. Create today. Save today. Rest today. Say no today. Take the first step today. Then wake up tomorrow and do it again. Galatians 6:9 reminds us that the harvest belongs to those who refuse to give up. And that means your consistency matters even when the evidence is invisible. God may be preparing the door, but you must prepare the person who will walk through it. So for the next 30 days, stop waiting for a perfect moment and start becoming faithful in the imperfect moment you already have. Pray for favor, prepare for opportunity, trust God's timing, and keep moving. Because when your daily decisions begin agreeing with your prayers, you are no longer simply hoping for a different life. You are actively positioning yourself to live it. Now, I want you to hear me with your heart, because we have come to the moment where inspiration must become conviction, and conviction must become a decision. You have heard about procrastination, distraction, comparison, fear, burnout, discipline, preparation, positioning, and favor. But none of this matters if you walk away unchanged. You cannot spend 50 minutes agreeing with truth and then return tomorrow morning to the same habits that have been keeping you stuck. There comes a moment when you have to stop asking, "When will my life change?" and begin asking, "What decision must change in me?" Maybe God has not forgotten you. Maybe He has been calling you deeper. Maybe the delay has been developing you. Maybe the closed door has been protecting you. Maybe the quiet season has been preparing you. Maybe the responsibility in your hands today is the training ground for the opportunity you have been praying for tomorrow. So before we ask God for another blessing, another opportunity, another door, or another breakthrough, let us ask Him for the wisdom and discipline to remain in the right position when the answer finally comes. Lord, keep me in the right position. Keep my heart aligned with your will when my emotions want to lead me somewhere else. Keep my mind focused when distraction is calling my name from every direction. Keep my eyes from becoming consumed by comparison when someone else's success makes me question my own journey. Keep my hands disciplined when motivation disappears and the work becomes difficult. Keep my feet steady when fear tells me to turn around. Keep me humble when opportunity comes, because I never want the blessing to become more important to me than the one who gave it. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds me to trust you with all my heart, not to lean entirely on my own understanding, and to acknowledge you in all my ways so that you can direct my path. So direct me, Lord. If I am moving too fast, slow me down. If I am standing still when I should move, give me courage. If I am chasing something you never assigned to me, give me the strength to release it. If I am distracted by what looks impressive but is not purposeful, turn my eyes back toward what you have called me to do. Lord, I refuse to call procrastination waiting on you when you have already given me something to do. I refuse to call fear wisdom when fear is simply trying to keep me from taking the next step. I refuse to call comparison motivation when it is stealing my peace and making me despise my own process. I refuse to call exhaustion faithfulness when I have ignored the boundaries and rest you designed me to need. Teach me the difference between waiting and avoiding, between preparation and procrastination, between discipline and striving, between ambition and comparison. Give me wisdom to know what belongs in this season, and courage to release what does not. Help me understand that I do not have to chase every opportunity, answer every voice, impress every person, or compete with every individual around me. My assignment is not to become somebody else. My assignment is to become faithful with what you have placed in my hands. And Lord, when my strength cannot speak for me, let your favor speak for me. When my resume cannot open the door, let your favor speak for me. When my resources seem insufficient, let your wisdom and favor speak for me.
When people overlook me, remind me that being overlooked by people does not mean being forgotten by God. When the opportunity appears impossible, remind me that you are not limited by what I can see. Psalm 91:17 asks that your favor rest upon us and that you establish the work of our hands. And that is my prayer today. Establish what I am building. Establish what I am learning. Establish what I am creating. Establish the work I am doing with integrity. Establish the relationships that are aligned with your purpose. Establish the plans that honor you and remove the plans that would take me away from you. Let my work be fruitful. Let my character be strong. And let my life become evidence that your grace can work through an obedient person. Father, I also pray for the person who has been waiting for a breakthrough for a very long time. They have prayed, but the answer seems delayed. They have worked, but the results seem small. They have applied, but rejection keeps coming. They have started again and again, but disappointment has made them tired. Today, remind them of Galatians 6:9. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Give them strength to keep sowing. Give them grace to keep preparing. Give them courage to keep learning. Give them faith to keep believing without becoming passive. Let them understand that a delayed harvest is not necessarily a denied harvest, and that their responsibility is to remain faithful while trusting you with the timing. Where they have fallen, help them rise. Where they have failed, help them learn. Where they have become discouraged, breathe fresh hope into them. Where they have lost their focus, bring them back into position. And now I want you to make a decision. Do not simply listen to this prayer. Agree with it through your actions. Tomorrow morning, wake up differently. Pray differently. Think differently. Work differently. Guard your attention differently.
Stop postponing what you know you need to do. Stop allowing comparison to dictate your confidence. Stop allowing fear to make decisions for you. Stop waiting for motivation before you obey. Take the next step, however small it may be. Proverbs 6:8 reminds us to learn from the ant which prepares without needing someone to constantly push it. So prepare, work, learn, pray, build, save, study, create, serve. Rest when you need to rest. But do not use rest as an excuse to avoid responsibility. Let your faith have feet. Let your prayers produce action. Let your discipline become evidence that you believe the future God is preparing you for is worth preparing for today. So, I declare over you today, You will not remain trapped in the same cycles. You will not allow procrastination to steal another season. You will not allow distraction to consume another year. You will not allow fear to make another decision for you. You will not allow comparison to make you despise your journey. You will not a confused delay with abandonment. You will not give up simply because the harvest has not appeared yet. You will learn to stay faithful in the ordinary, disciplined in the hidden place, focused when nobody is watching, and courageous when the next step feels uncertain. And when the right door opens, you will not be scrambling to become ready, because you will have been preparing all along. You will be positioned, you will be prepared, you will be focused, you will be disciplined. And when your strength cannot speak for you, may the favor of God speak for you. Finally, remember this. Pray for favor, but prepare for the door. Ask God to position you, then have the discipline to stay there. Your breakthrough does not require you to become someone you are not. It requires you to become faithful with who God is shaping you to be. Your future is not built in one dramatic moment. It is built through thousands of ordinary decisions made with extraordinary faithfulness.
So take the next step, make the call, finish the assignment, start the project, close the distracting app, open the Bible, pray the prayer, keep the commitment, rest when necessary. Begin again when you fall, and above everything else, keep your heart aligned with God. Because when your prayers and your practices finally agree, you will discover that divine positioning is not merely about where God takes you, it is about who you become while He is taking you there. Lord, keep me in the right position, and when my struggle cannot speak for me, let your favor speak for me in Jesus' name. Amen.